In order to talk about immunity, we first have to talk about the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system, when we talk about immunity, we're going to talk a lot first about the lymphatic system. What we call our immune system is made up of a lot of different players that are parts of a lot of different systems, and one of those big players is the lymphatic system. We'll talk about the different ways that the different parts of different systems of our body interact in order to keep us healthy. So, in first talking about what the immune system is, we're going to go over some of the major players. In order to do that, let's watch this video clip.
Every second of your life, you are under attack. Billions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi are trying to make you their home. So our bodies have developed a super complex little army with guards, soldiers, intelligence, weapons factories, and communicators to protect you from, dying. For this video, let's assume the immune system has 12 different jobs. For example, kill enemies, communicate, etc. And it has 21 different cells and 2 protein forces. These cells have up to 4 different jobs. Let's assign them. Here are the interactions. Now, let's make this understandable. First of all, let's add colors to the jobs. Now, let's illustrate the cells. The central color represents the main job of the cell, while the surrounding ones represent secondary duties. Now, the immune system looks like this. Now, the interactions. Isn't this complexity just awesome?
So, when we look at this chart and we look at all those interactions, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But at the same time, it just goes to show how many different parts are interacting in order to keep us healthy without us even realizing it. So, when we talk about the immune system, we're talking about a system whose function is to fight against illness and infection. It keeps us safe and healthy. This is not a regular system with a specific set of organs and tissues. It's a group of different parts of different systems that work together in order to help fight off the illness and the infection. The immune system is always working to keep you healthy, and it's working to keep you healthy in 2 different ways. The first way is that it's working just to help you against any general germs that you're facing throughout the day. So, for example, as you're walking through life, there are tons of viruses, bacteria, fungi, all different types of things that could cause you illness if they got into your body. And so your body is working to help fight those off. These are called innate or non-specific defenses. Your immune system is also working to fight specific foreign invaders. There are specific responses to these specific invaders, like we talked about before when we were talking about the antigens in blood types and the specific antibodies that fight those off. So these are things like the flu, a cold, cancer, HIV, coronavirus, and these are specific invaders that your body works to fight off. The main parts of the immune system are going to be the lymphatic system as a whole. The skin plays a huge role, as well as other parts of the integumentary system, your nails and your hair. Your mucous membranes throughout all of your different body systems play a big role. And then lastly, your white blood cells or your leukocytes play a really big role in your immune system. These leukocytes are produced by your bone marrow, as we learned way back in the skeletal system unit. They're differentiated into different types of blood cells, including white blood cells. These white blood cells can be lymphocytes and phagocytes. Lymphocytes come as B cells or T cells, or become B cells or T cells, and we also have antibodies that we're going to talk about. So let's look at the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is a collection of cells and chemicals that travel within our lymphatic cells, plus the organs and the glands that are going to produce these chemicals. The lymphatic system has 2 functions. The first function is to take extra fluid from interstitial spaces, so the spaces between our cells, and take this extra fluid and dump it back into the bloodstream. The second thing that it does is it has both generalized and targeted attacks, as we just talked about, against invaders so that the body can destroy things that would try to infect it. If you have dysfunction in your lymphatic system, if your lymphatic system is not working correctly, you can have different problems. You can have an infection that becomes chronic, goes on for a long time. Cancer can also be a dysfunction. You can have allergies and you can have autoimmune disorders. We'll talk more about allergies and autoimmune disorders later on in the unit. The lymphatic system is very closely connected to the cardiovascular system. We'll talk about it in a few different ways, but even when you look at diagrams of the lymphatic system, they look very similar to diagrams of the cardiovascular system. We have cardiovascular capillaries and vessels, we have lymphatic capillaries and vessels. You can also see in this picture on the right how closely connected the capillaries are. So, the cardiovascular system is a closed loop that is continually being pumped by the heart. The lymphatic system, on the other hand, actually stops and dead ends in all these different places among the capillaries. So, these are some of the organs of the lymphatic system. You have lymph. Lymph is a fluid similar to blood. You have lymphatic capillaries, vessels, trunks, and collecting ducts. These are similar to our cardiovascular capillaries, blood vessels, and bigger blood vessels, like, for example, your aorta or your superior vena cava, the really big ones. You have lymph nodes, which you've probably heard about when you go to the doctor or when you're sick. You have your thymus, which is found in your chest, in your mediastinum, and you have your spleen, which is located over by your stomach and your pancreas. So, how does the lymphatic system work? The first thing we need to look at is the lymphatic capillaries. So, the lymphatic capillaries, as I mentioned, are kind of intertwined or parallel to the capillaries of our cardiovascular system. As you see, they dead end, and just like the capillaries in our cardiovascular system, they too are made of a single layer of simple squamous cells. So, because they're made up of simple squamous cells, they're able to have diffusion occur through them very, very quickly. That's important because we need our interstitial fluid, the fluid from between the cells, to enter these lymphatic capillaries. What happens is you've got your capillaries, right? And they deliver all kinds of things. So we've talked about how they deliver oxygen, they also deliver glucose, they deliver the things that the tissue needs. One of those things is also water. So you're going to have the water and solutes come into the spaces, and you might have extra, whether it's through waste through the cells or there's just extra water, extra solutes. Some of that is going to go back into the veins to then return to the heart. But you have extra water and extra solutes that are kind of just stuck between the cells. The cells don't need them, but they've had too much already go back, and so that diffuses into the lymph vessel. When it diffuses into these lymphatic capillaries, that's called lymph. Lymph is a watery fluid, very similar to blood plasma, and it has white blood cells in it. This lymph is going to travel through the lymphatic capillaries, and these capillaries, just like with the blood vessels, are going to become bigger, wider, and the wider ones are known as lymphatic vessels. So, similar to veins, you want one-way flow. And so you have these valves. So when the lymph comes through, the valves are going to shut behind them so that it keeps going in one direction, in this case, upward. You can see that the lymph kind of enters in wherever it wants and then, or wherever it can, and then it continues to flow in one direction. One thing that's different is that lymph is under a lower pressure. There is no pump. We'll talk about that in a second. There is no heart keeping this circulating. So, how it works is instead of having a heart, a pump to keep this lymph circulating. The lymphatic system uses pressure from skeletal muscles. It uses the pressure changes as we breathe, and a little bit, to some extent, the blood flow. So, as our muscles move, as we breathe in and out, or as our blood flows through the capillaries and the blood vessels that are really close to the lymphatic vessels, the lymph continues to be pushed along. And that's part of why those valves are so important, so they can only be pushed in one direction. So, the lymph is in the lymphatic vessels. These lymphatic vessels lead to lymph nodes. In the lymph nodes, the lymph is filtered and an immune response is triggered if there are foreign particles that are detected. And so you can see here it's like kind of a denser collection of tissue, but it's a little bit hollow and it has different trabeculae, same as that same spongy look like in our bone. And so the lymph will come in, so you can see here coming in along the one-way valves. It gets screened, kind of like a security screening, and goes out. Just like when you're in the airport, if you don't have any problems, you go through the screening checkpoint and you just keep going, no problem. If there's something that triggers the alarm, then we're going to have some sort of response so that that does not cause us any harm. So the lymph is sent along these blood vessels through the lymph nodes into lymphatic trunks and then collecting ducts. Sorry. So it's sent to the lymphatic trunks and then to collecting ducts. And these ducts dump the lymph back into the cardiovascular system right before the right atrium. So right before in the vena cava, right before the vena cava, it gets dumped kind of back in there, this extra fluid, so that it can then be circulated again through our cardiovascular system as part of the blood. And then the excess water will go into the capillaries, then more water will come back into the lymphatic capillaries. And so it keeps regulating the amount of water that's in our blood. So that gets us out of all of the lymph things. There are two other organs within our lymphatic system. One is the thymus, and the other is the spleen. The thymus is made of lymphatic tissue. As I mentioned, it's in the mediastinum, just above the heart. Your thymus is really, really, really big when you're born, and it shrinks as you get older. By the time you're elderly, it is replaced by connective tissue and adipose. The reason that it shrinks as you get older is because you don't need it anymore. The thymus secretes hormones that stimulate T cell production, a type of lymphocyte. And so as you get older, you don't need these to continually be producing again. And so once your immune system is kind of fully formed, the thymus starts to shrink away. The spleen is the largest lymphatic organ. It's found in the upper left side of your abdomen near your stomach and your pancreas, so it kind of sits on the side of your stomach. It's similar in internal structure to a large lymph node, but instead of filtering lymph, it filters blood. As it filters blood through its network, old red blood cells, bacteria, other foreign particles undergo phagocytosis. They're engulfed and they're destroyed. You'll also perhaps have heard when someone has mononucleosis or mono, their spleen becomes enlarged. And one of the things after they've recovered from mono, their spleen has to go back down. That's because it's working harder to engulf and destroy the foreign particles that were in the body.